Think about this for a second. You and, say, a friend are in a bit of a sticky situation. Maybe both, I don't know, saw something you weren't supposed to, or maybe you messed up together on a big project.
Uh-huh.
Now, you're being questioned
Yeah.
separately.
Mm-hmm.
If you both just keep quiet, maybe you both get off lightly, slap on the wrist.
Okay.
But here's the catch. If one of you rats the other out, the snitch walks free, totally free, and the other person takes all the blame. So what do you do?
Right.
It feels pretty straightforward on the surface, doesn't it? But this little puzzle, it's actually right at the heart of this really powerful idea.
Right.
It helps explain all sorts of decisions we make, from like small disagreements to huge international standoffs.
That's a brilliant way to set it up. You've basically just described the core of the prisoner's dilemma,
Oh,
which is a real cornerstone of game theory. And that's exactly what we're going to, dive into today. We'll unpack this really fascinating thought experiment, look at why it creates such a tricky situation, and explore how it pops up surprisingly often in our daily lives and, the wider world.
right.
Our goal here is pretty simple. Give you a clear, kind of jargon-free understanding of this whole concept and what it means for us.
Exactly. Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is just that.
Yeah.
To get you comfortable with the prisoner's dilemma. We've looked at some really interesting material covering, everything from the basic setup to how things change when you play the game over and over again, some real-world examples that might actually surprise you, and even some related ideas that sort of build on it. Okay, so let's really get into it. What is the prisoner's dilemma in its, classic form?
Okay, so the classic story, the one that gave it its pretty dramatic name, it comes from a scenario that was first properly laid out by the mathematician Albert Tucker, though people like William Poundstone really helped popularize it. Picture two people, let's just call them prisoner A and prisoner B. They're suspected of committing a crime together.
Okay.
They get arrested, police put them in separate interrogation rooms. Crucially, they can't talk to each other at all. The police, they don't actually have enough solid evidence for a major conviction on their own, so they offer each prisoner the exact same deal.
Ah, the classic deal. Sounds ominous. What's the offer on the table?
Okay, here are the terms. If one prisoner testifies against the other, let's call this defecting or maybe betraying.
Okay, defecting, got it.
And the other one stays silent. We'll call that cooperating with their partner.
Cooperating. Right.
Then the one who testifies goes completely free, 0 jail time. But the one who stayed silent, they get hit with a 3-year prison sentence.
Ouch. Okay, that's one possibility. Free versus 3 years. What if they both cooperate, both stay silent?
Right. So if both prisoners choose to stay silent, keep quiet, the police probably can only convict them on a much lesser charge. So in that case, they each get a relatively light sentence, maybe just 1 year each.
Okay, so 1 year each if they both cooperate. That sounds like the best group outcome so far. What's the third option? The one we're kind of dreading.
The third possibility is, what happens if they both decide to testify against each other? Both defect.
Uh-oh.
In that scenario, the police now have plenty of evidence for a more serious conviction, and both prisoners end up serving 2 years each in prison.
Okay, let's quickly recap that. Both silent.
Yeah.
1 year each. Good for them. One talks, one silent. Talker goes free. Silent gets 3 years. Really bad for the silent one. Both talk. 2 years each. Bad, but not as bad as 3 years.
Exactly. Those are the stakes.
Right. So now let's put you, our listener, right into one of those rooms. Imagine you're prisoner A. You have absolutely no clue what prisoner B is going to do over there in the other room. What's your move? Do you stay silent? Cooperate with your partner, hoping they do the same so you both just get that 1 year? Or do you testify? Defect. Hoping you walk free while B takes the 3-year hit. It's genuinely tough when you're completely in the dark like that.
It is tough. That's exactly what makes it a dilemma and why it's so interesting to think about. So, okay, let's try and think through the rational approach, just from prisoner A's point of view. They have to think about the two things B might do, right? B stays silent or B testifies.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down. Scenario 1. What if A assumes B is going to stay silent? What should A do?
Okay, so if prisoner B stays silent, prisoner A looks at their own two choices. Stay silent too and get 1 year in prison. Or testify and go free.
Well, that seems obvious. Going free is better than a year in prison.
Exactly. So if A thinks B will be silent, A's best personal move is to testify, to defect.
Okay, makes logical sense from A's perspective. Now, scenario 2, what if A thinks B is going to testify? What's A's best move then?
Right. So if prisoner B testifies, prisoner A again looks at their two options: stay silent and get the sucker's payoff 3 years, or testify as well and get 2 years.
Oh, okay. Well, 2 years is definitely better than 3 years.
Right. So if A thinks B will testify, A's best move is still to testify, to defect.
Huh. So, wait a minute. It looks like no matter what prisoner B does, whether B stays silent or testifies, prisoner A is always better off testifying. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And crucially, the exact same logic applies perfectly to prisoner B when they're thinking about what prisoner A might do.
Oh,
Whatever A decides, B will also figure out that their best individual outcome comes from testifying. And this leads us to a really, really important idea in game theory, something called a strictly dominant strategy.
a dominant strategy. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Well, a strictly dominant strategy is basically a move that gives a player a better payoff than any of their other possible moves, regardless of what the other player or players choose to do.
Ah, okay. It's always the best choice for you, no matter what.
Precisely. And in the classic prisoner's dilemma, testifying, or defecting, as we called it, is the strictly dominant strategy for both prisoners. It's the individually rational thing to do, purely based on self-interest, regardless of what you think the other person might do.
Okay, so if both prisoners are thinking rationally, purely about minimizing their own jail time, they'll both choose to testify, to defect. What's the final outcome then?
That outcome, where both prisoners testify and both get 2 years, is what we call a Nash equilibrium.
Nash equilibrium. Heard that term before. What is it in simple terms?
Think of it like a stable point in the game. It's a situation where no single player can do better by changing their strategy alone, assuming the other players keep their strategies the same.
Okay.
In the prisoner's dilemma, mutual defection, both testifying, getting 2 years each is the only strong Nash equilibrium. If you're a prisoner A and you know B is testifying, you don't want to switch to staying silent. That would get you 3 years instead of 2. Same logic for B. Neither has an incentive to change their mind on their own.
And here's the thing that feels so weird about it, right? The Nash equilibrium, the rational outcome, is 2 years each. But if they had just somehow managed to cooperate, both stay silent, they'd both only get 1 year. So by each doing what's best for them individually, they end up in a situation that's worse for both of them compared to mutual cooperation. That's the paradox, isn't it?
That is the central paradox, the absolute core of the prisoner's dilemma. Individual rationality leads directly to a collectively irrational, or at least suboptimal, outcome.
Right.
And you use the term worse outcome.
Yeah.
In game theory terms, that Nash equilibrium mutual defection is not Pareto efficient.
Pareto efficient.
Yeah, a situation is Pareto efficient if you literally can't make anyone better off without making at least one person worse off.
Okay.
In the prisoner's dilemma, the mutual silence outcome, 1 year each, is better for both prisoners than the mutual defection outcome, 2 years each. You can move from mutual defection to mutual silence and make both players better off. So the Nash equilibrium isn't Pareto efficient. The rational result isn't actually the best overall result for the group.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got the classic prisoner story down. But you said earlier this basic idea applies way beyond just, cops and robbers scenarios. How do we generalize this? Take the core structure out.
Absolutely. The real power of the prisoner's dilemma isn't the story. It's the underlying mathematical structure of the payoffs. We can make it more abstract to see how it applies elsewhere.
Okay.
So forget prisoners. Let's just imagine two abstract players, maybe call them red and blue. And instead of testify or stay silent, let's use the general terms cooperate and defect.
Cooperate and defect. Okay, simpler terms. So what are the payoffs now for red and blue?
Right, so there are still 4 possible outcomes
All right.
based on what red chooses and what blue chooses. If both red and blue choose to cooperate, they each get what we call the reward for mutual cooperation. We usually label this R.
R for reward. Got it.
If both red and blue choose to defect, they both get the punishment payoff, labeled P.
P for punishment. Makes sense.
Now here's where it gets interesting. If one player defects while the other cooperates, the one who defects gets the temptation payoff, T. It's tempting because they exploit the other's cooperation for a big game.
Key for temptation.
Okay.
And the poor cooperator.
The one who cooperates while the other defects, they get the worst outcome, the sucker's payoff, usually labeled S.
S for sucker, right?
Okay.
TRPS. So for any old game with cooperate defect choices to actually be a prisoner's dilemma, is there a specific relationship these payoffs need to have? Like a mathematical rule?
Yes, absolutely. There's a crucial condition. For a game to qualify as a strong prisoner's dilemma, the payoffs must follow this specific order, this inequality. The temptation payoff, T, has to be greater than the reward payoffs.
Okay, TR. Defecting alone is better than cooperating together.
Right, and the reward must be greater than the punishment payoff, B.
Cooperating together is better than defecting together.
Correct. And finally, the punishment P must be greater than the sucker's payoff.
P.S. Defecting together is bad, but it's still better than being the only one cooperating while the other defects.
Exactly. So the full condition is TRPS.
TRPS. Okay. Temptation, reward, punishment, sucker.
Mhm.
I think I get the incentives that creates. The biggest prize is to betray a cooperator. Mutual cooperation is second best. Mutual betrayal is third best. And being the betrayed cooperator is the worst possible outcome.
You've nailed it. That precise ordering of payoffs is what drives the whole dilemma, because even in this general form, look what happens. Defection is still the dominant strategy for both red and blue.
How so? Break it down again with TRPS.
Okay, suppose red thinks blue is going to cooperate. Red can cooperate too and get R, or defect and get T. Since TR, red is better off defecting.
Right.
Now, suppose red thinks blue is going to defect. Red can cooperate and get S, or defect too and get P. Since PS, red is still better off defecting.
So just like before, no matter what red thinks blue will do, red's best move is always to defect.
Always. And the same logic applies perfectly to blue. So even when we strip it down to this abstract TRPS structure, the core problem is identical. Individual rational self-interest pushes both players towards mutual defection, is getting P each, even though mutual cooperation, getting R each, would have been better for both of them since RP.
Okay, that's clear. But, most interactions in life aren't just one-shot deals like the police interrogation. What happens if red and blue play this game, say, multiple times, over and over?
Now that changes things significantly. When you play the prisoner's dilemma repeatedly between the same players, we call it the iterated prisoner's dilemma.
Iterated, okay.
And in this version, players can remember what happened in previous rounds. They know the history of interaction. Did the other player cooperate last time? Did they defect? And they can adjust their strategy based on that history.
That seems huge, because now there are consequences, right? If I defect now, maybe you'll defect next time.
Exactly. The possibility of future interactions casts a long shadow back onto the present decision. This introduces concepts like reputation, trust, retaliation, forgiveness, things that just don't exist in the one-shot game. It opens the door for cooperation to actually emerge and be sustained.
That makes a lot more sense intuitively. If I know I have to deal with you again tomorrow, I might think twice about ripping you off today.
Precisely. There's actually another condition sometimes added for the iterated game, which is 2RT plus S.
2R greater than T plus S. What's that about?
It basically ensures that endless mutual cooperation, getting R every round, is better in the long run than constantly alternating between cooperating and defecting, where you'd average T plus S2 each round. It just makes sure that simple cooperation is genuinely the best long-term shared goal.
Okay, so in this iterated game where we play again and again, now is it better to cooperate? Or is always defecting still somehow the best strategy?
Well, this is where it gets a bit counterintuitive again, especially in theory. If, and this is a big if both players know exactly how many rounds the game will last, say, they know it will end after exactly 100 rounds.
Okay, a fixed, known endpoint.
Then, surprisingly, the logic of always defect can still take hold. It's worked out using something called backward induction.
Backward induction, how does that work?
You start by thinking about the very last round, round 100. In that final round, there's no future, right? No more rounds after this. So whatever you do now has no future consequences for the game.
Right, it's like the one-shot game again at the very end.
Exactly. So in round 100, the rational choice for both players is just a defect, based on the original dominant strategy logic, TR and PS. Both players know this.
Okay, makes sense for the last round. So what?
Well, now consider the second to last round, round 99. Since both players know that they will both defect in round 100 regardless of what happens now, there's no incentive to cooperate in round 99 to try and build goodwill for the future. The future is already determined. Mutual defection.
Ah, I see. So cooperating in round 99 won't buy you cooperation in round 100.
Correct. So the rational thing to do in round 99 is also to defect.
Oh, dear. I think I see where this is going.
Yeah. You apply the same logic to round 98, knowing what will happen in 99 and 100, then 97 and so on. The logic unravels all the way back to the very first round.
So the theoretical conclusion is, If the number of rounds is fixed and known, you should just defect from the very beginning every single time.
That's the rather chilling conclusion from pure backward induction.
Wow, that seems really pessimistic. Does that actually happen when people play these games?
Well, it's the theoretical result under those specific conditions.
Yeah.
But in the real world, or even in experiments, things are often different. Crucially, most real-world interactions don't have a precisely known fixed endpoint.
Yeah, that's true. You don't usually know exactly when your relationship with a colleague or a neighbor is going to end.
Exactly. When the number of rounds is unknown, or potentially infinite, or even just uncertain, then the shadow of the future becomes much more potent. Cooperation can emerge and be stable.
Why? What changes?
Because now, the potential long-term benefits of establishing mutual cooperation might outweigh the short-term temptation to defect just once. If you defect now, you risk triggering a long cycle of mutual defection in all those future unknown rounds, which could be very costly for both of you. So building trust and maintaining cooperation becomes potentially much more valuable.
So in ongoing relationships, there's a real mathematical, strategic reason to try and cooperate, beyond just, being nice.
Yes, definitely. And we see this in how people actually behave. There was an interesting study in the American Economic Review back in 2019 that looked at how people played the iterated prisoner's dilemma. They found that several strategies were common.
Like what?
Well, always defect was certainly one strategy people used, but they also saw a lot of tit for tat, which is a cooperative strategy.
Tit for tat. Yeah, you mentioned that. I've definitely heard of it. What is that exactly?
And another strategy called grim trigger.
Grim trigger. Sounds harsh.
It is. Grim trigger means you cooperate until the first time your opponent defects, and then you just defect forever after that. No forgiveness.
Ouch. So tit for tat, grim trigger, always defect. Quite a mix.
Yeah, and which strategy worked best often depended on the specific setup, like how likely future interactions were. But tit for tat is particularly famous.
Right. Tell me more about tit for tat. It came out of some kind of tournament, didn't it?
Yes, exactly. It really shot to fame thanks to Robert Axelrod, a political scientist who ran these amazing computer tournaments back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Computer tournaments. How did that work?
He basically invited game theorists, computer scientists, economists, anyone interested, to submit computer programs strategies that would play the iterated prisoner's dilemma against each other. Hundreds of rounds, playing against every other submitted strategy.
Wow, like a robot battle royale for cooperation? What was he trying to find out?
He wanted to see which strategies would actually be the most successful, the most robust, when faced with a whole diverse population of other strategies, from simple to highly complex.
And the results were surprising, you said.
Very surprising at the time. The winning strategy across both tournaments he ran was tit for tat. And it was submitted by a psychologist and game theorist named Anatol Rapoport.
And what was so surprising about it? Was it super complex?
No, that was the surprise. It was incredibly simple, almost laughably simple compared to some of the really sophisticated strategies submitted.
So what does it do? How does tit for tat work?
Just two rules. Rule 1, on the very first move, cooperate. Start nice.
Okay, cooperate first.
Rule 2, on every subsequent move, just do whatever your opponent did on the immediately preceding move.
That's it. So if they cooperated last time, you cooperate this time. If they defected last time, you defect this time.
That's literally it. Copycat, essentially.
Yeah.
Cooperate initially, then mirror their last move.
Wow. It seems too simple to win against complex algorithms designed to exploit weaknesses.
It really did seem that way, but it worked. There was also a slightly modified version, tit for tat with forgiveness, that did very well too.
Forgiveness, how does that work?
It's basically tit for tat, but with a very small chance, like maybe 1% or 5%, that you'll cooperate, even if the opponent defected on the last move.
Why add that randomness?
It helps break out of cycles of mutual recrimination. Imagine there was just a misunderstanding or a single accidental defection. Regular tit for tat could get locked into defect forever. The small chance of forgiveness allows it to potentially reset back to cooperation.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. A little bit of grace. So based on these tournaments, what did Axelrod conclude makes a strategy successful in this iterated game? What are the key ingredients?
He identified some key characteristics that seem to be shared by the most successful strategies, like tit for tat. First, they tended to be nice.
Nice. Meaning
Meaning they never defect first. They always start by cooperating and won't defect unless provoked.
Okay, start nice.
Yeah.
What else?
Second, they were retaliating. If the opponent defected, they would respond by defecting too, usually on the next move. They don't just let themselves be exploited repeatedly.
So don't be a pushover. Got it.
Third, they were forgiving. After retaliating against a defection, if the opponent switched back to cooperation, they were willing to cooperate again too. They didn't hold grudges forever, unlike Grim Trigger.
Okay, forgive quickly if they cooperate again.
And fourth, they were generally non-envious. Their main goal wasn't necessarily to score more points than the opponent in any single interaction, but rather to maximize their own score over the long run. They weren't trying to beat the other player, just do well for themselves, which often meant fostering mutual cooperation.
Nice. Retaliating, forgiving, and non-envious. That's a really interesting set of principles. It sounds like a recipe for, well, productive long-term relationships in general, almost.
It really does resonate, doesn't it? It suggests that being initially cooperative, but clear about consequences, quick to forgive, and focused on mutual benefit rather than zero-sum competition is a really robust approach in many ongoing interactions.
But you also mentioned that the best strategy isn't fixed, right?
No.
It depends on who else is playing.
Yes, that's a crucial point. The success of a strategy like tit for tat depends on the environment, the population of other strategies it's interacting with. If you're dropped into a world where literally everyone else always defects, no matter what, then tit for tat will just end up defecting constantly after the first move. In that specific scenario, always defect might actually be your best bet.
Okay.
But as soon as you have a mix of strategies, including some that are conditionally cooperative, like tit for tat, then those nice strategies can find each other, cooperate, and outperform the more aggressive strategies in the long run. They can kind of invade and take over a population of defectors under the right conditions.
Fascinating. Okay, so we've got the theory, the iterated game, the winning strategies. Let's bring it back down to earth again. Where do we actually see these prisoner's dilemma dynamics playing out in the real world? You mentioned climate change earlier.
Right. Climate change negotiations are a classic large-scale example. Every country, arguably, benefits in the long run from a stable climate, which needs collective action to cut emissions. That's the mutual cooperation payoff. But any individual country might think, well, cutting our emissions is expensive and might hurt our economy while the benefit is shared globally. Maybe we can let others cut their emissions and we'll just free ride. That's the temptation to defect.
Right. And if everyone thinks that way.
Then nobody cuts emissions significantly, and we head towards the mutual punishment of severe climate change, which is worse for everyone than if they had all cooperated. And the country that does cut emissions while others don't risks the sucker's payoff, bearing the cost without getting the full benefit, and maybe losing economic competitiveness.
Yeah, I could really see the TRPS structure there. And the uncertainty about exactly how bad things will get probably makes it even harder to cooperate.
Exactly. Uncertainty adds another layer of complexity. What about in the animal kingdom? You hinted at that.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Animals playing game theory?
Well, maybe not consciously. But some of their evolved behaviors fit the model remarkably well. Think about predator inspection in fish, like guppies.
Predator inspection.
Yeah, sometimes a few guppies will cautiously swim out towards a potential predator, seemingly to check it out, assess the danger level. This is risky for the individual inspectors, potential S payoff if the predator attacks.
Okay.
But the information benefits the whole group, R payoff. If a guppy defects by hanging back while others inspect, it gets the info without the risk, T payoff. But if everyone hangs back, mutual defection P, nobody knows how dangerous the predator is.
Huh. So how does cooperation survive?
It's thought that maybe there's some kind of iterated game going on. Perhaps defectors are recognized and punished later, maybe excluded from the group or future cooperative ventures. Or consider vampire bats sharing blood meals.
Right, I've heard about that.
A bat that fails to feed one night might starve. A bat that did feed might regurgitate some blood to share with a starving roostmate. This looks like cooperation.
Okay.
The temptation, T, is to hoard your own meal. Mutual cooperation involves sharing when needed and receiving when needed. Mutual defection, P, means nobody shares. And the sucker, S, is sharing but never receiving. Studies suggest bats are more likely to share with those who have previously shared with them, essentially playing a form of tit for tat over time.
That's incredible. Evolution kind of finding its way to reciprocal altruism through these payoff structures.
Yeah.
What about closer to home, human psychology relationships?
Yep, the dilemma pops up there too. Some psychologists view addiction, for instance, as a kind of internal prisoner's dilemma.
Yeah.
Your present self wants the immediate gratification from the substance, the temptation, T2.
Yeah.
Your future self would benefit hugely from abstinence, the reward, R. If you abstain but then relapse, it feels like the sucker's payoff. And continued addiction might be the punishment state. P. The struggle is that the immediate T often feels stronger than the distant R.
Wow, that's a powerful way to frame it.
Yeah.
What about relationships between people?
Well, think about trust and betrayal in partnerships. Researchers like John Gottman, who studied married couples extensively, found that stable, happy relationships are often characterized by couples managing to avoid getting stuck in cycles of negative reciprocity, basically, avoiding tit-for-tat spirals of negativity or mutual defection. They find ways to break the cycle, perhaps through forgiveness or overlooking minor defections.
So, managing to stay in the cooperative state, even when there are temptations or slip-ups. What about the business world? Economics seems like a natural fit.
Oh, definitely. Economics is full of prisoners' dilemmas. Take advertising. Two big companies, say Coke and Pepsi. If neither advertises heavily, they save a lot of money and probably maintain their market shares. But if Coke advertises massively and Pepsi doesn't, Coke might steal market share. T for Coke, S for Pepsi.
Right, the temptation to get ahead.
But if both advertise heavily, the ads might just cancel each other out. They both spend a fortune, market shares don't change much, and they both end up worse off than if neither had advertised.
The advertising arms race.
Exactly. It's a classic dilemma. Interestingly, sometimes industries find ways out. Like, when cigarette companies actually supported bans on TV advertising, it might have been a way for them all to collectively stop spending huge amounts, effectively enforcing cooperation to avoid the P outcome.
Huh. Using regulation to solve the dilemma. What about cartels, like OPEC?
Perfect example of a multiplayer prisoner's dilemma. All the oil-producing countries in the cartel agree to limit production to keep prices high. Mutual cooperation are. But each individual country has a huge temptation, T, to secretly pump out a bit more oil than their quota to grab extra profits, hoping the others won't notice or won't retaliate immediately. But if too many countries cheat, defect. Production floods the market, prices crash, and everyone in the cartel ends up worse off, P. Cartels are inherently unstable because of this internal prisoner's dilemma.
It seems like this structure is just everywhere once you start looking for it. Sports.
Yeah.
Any examples there?
Doping is the classic one in sports. Imagine two cyclists in the Tour de France. The best outcome for clean sport is if neither dopes. But if one dopes and the other doesn't, the doper gets a huge advantage, T, and the clean rider is the sucker. If both dopes, maybe the competitive balance is restored, but now they both face serious health risks, the risk of getting caught, damaging the sport's reputation. They're arguably both worse off than if neither had doped, PM. Again, TRPS pushes individuals towards doping, even if it harms the collective.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And international politics, you mentioned arms races earlier.
Right. The security dilemma in international relations is often framed as a prisoner's dilemma. Country A builds up its military forces, maybe just for defense, it thinks, cooperating in the sense of maintaining peace. But country B sees this buildup and feels threatened. It doesn't know A's true intentions. So B feels it has to build up its military in response, defecting from peaceful status quo or perhaps retaliating.
And then country A sees B building up.
Exactly. Then A feels less secure and builds up even more. You get an arms race, mutual defection, P, where both countries spend vast resources, increase tensions, and might end up feeling less secure than when they started. R, or maybe even S if one feels significantly behind. The temptation T might be seen as achieving temporary military superiority.
It's a really powerful model for explaining why conflict can happen, even when maybe no one really wants it. So we've mostly talked about two players. What about when there are lots of people involved, like the cartel example or climate change?
Yeah, the same basic logic extends, but it gets more complex. The most famous multiplayer version is probably Garrett Hardin's idea of the tragedy of the commons.
Tragedy of the commons.
Imagine a pasture, a common grazing area, open to all the herders in a village. Everyone benefits if the pasture is healthy. But each individual herder thinks, if I add just one more sheep, I get all the profit from that sheep, while the cost of slightly overgrazing is shared among everyone.
That's the temptation, T, for each herder.
Exactly. But if every herder thinks that way and adds extra sheep, the pasture gets totally depleted, the grass dies, and all the sheep starve. The common resource is destroyed, and everyone suffers. P.
So individual rational decisions lead to collective ruin. Is it always a tragedy?
Well, Hardin thought it often was, but later work, particularly by Elinor Ostrom, who won a Nobel Prize for it, showed that's not always true.
Oh, how so?
Ostrom studied real communities around the world that successfully managed common resources, fisheries, forests, irrigation systems for centuries without destroying them. She found that communities can, under the right conditions, develop their own rules, monitoring systems, and social norms to enforce cooperation and prevent the tragedy. It's not automatic, but it is possible.
That's really important. So cooperation can overcome the multiplayer dilemma sometimes. Were there other related games or variations you mentioned? Something simpler?
Yeah, Douglas Hofstadter came up with a very neat, simple illustration called the closed bag exchange.
Closed bag exchange.
Imagine you and I agree to trade. I'll give you a bag that's supposed to have, say, $100 in it. You'll give me a bag that's supposed to have a valuable watch in it. We exchange the closed bags simultaneously.
Okay.
Now, each of us has a choice. Put the real item in the bag, cooperate, or put in an empty bag, or, rocks, defect.
Nice.
If we both cooperate, we both get what we wanted. If I defect, empty bag, and you cooperate, real watch, I get the watch for free, and you get nothing. S. Vice versa, if you defect and I cooperate. If we both defect, both give empty bags. Neither of us gets anything. P. It's the prisoner's dilemma in a nutshell.
That really clarifies the TRPS structure perfectly. You also mentioned a game show, Friend or Foe.
Right. That was a real game show where, in the final round, two contestants who had worked together to build up a pot of money had to secretly choose friend, cooperate, or foe, defect.
How did the payoffs work?
If both chose friend, they split the money. If one chose foe and the other friend, the foe got all the money and the friend got nothing. T for the foe, S for the friend.
Okay, standard so far.
Yeah.
What if both chose foe?
Here's the slight difference from the standard prisoner's dilemma. If both chose foe, they both got nothing. P0.
So PS in that game. Mutual defection is just as bad as being the sucker.
Exactly. In the standard prisoner's dilemma, usually PS, 2 years is better than 3 years, that small change in friend or foe makes mutual defection less appealing relative to being the sucker, which subtly changes the game dynamics. It makes mutual defection a weak equilibrium, not a strict one.
Interesting how sensitive it is to the exact payoffs. What about that Snowdrift game you mentioned? How's that different?
The iterated Snowdrift game, yeah, it's seen as maybe a better model for some types of cooperation. Imagine two drivers stuck in cars, facing each other, blocked by a big snowdrift.
Okay, stuck in the snow.
Each driver can either get out and shovel, cooperate, or stay in the warm car, defect. If at least one person shovels, the road gets cleared, and both drivers can leave. They both benefit. But shoveling is effort. It has a cost.
Right, so if I shovel and you don't.
If you shovel, cooperate, and I stay in the car, defect, the road gets cleared. We both benefit from the clear road, but only you paid the cost of shoveling. So you get the benefit minus the cost, I just get the benefit. This is different from the prisoner's dilemma's sucker payoff, where the cooperator gets punished badly.
So cooperating when the other defects still gives me some benefit in Snowdrift?
Yes, because the road gets cleared regardless. If both shovel, the road gets cleared faster or easier, so maybe both get a slightly higher benefit, but both pay the cost.
Yeah.
If neither shovels, mutual defection, nobody goes anywhere, which is the worst outcome for both.
So the incentive structure is different. It's always better to have the road cleared than not, even if you're the only one shoveling.
Generally, yes. The temptation is still to let the other person do the shoveling, but cooperating isn't potentially disastrous like in the prisoner's dilemma. Cooperation might be more likely to emerge because the risk of being exploited, the S payoff, isn't as severe.
That makes sense. It feels like it applies to situations where any contribution helps, even if others don't pitch in. What about games where the problem isn't conflict, but just matching up?
Right. Those are usually called coordination games. The classic example is two cars meeting on a single-lane road. Should they swerve left or right?
Doesn't matter which, as long as it's the same.
Exactly. The best outcome is they both swerve the same way, both left or both right. The worst outcome is they swerve different ways and crash. There's no temptation to defect here. Both players have the exact same interest, coordinate successfully. The challenge is just aligning their choices. Things like traffic laws, drive on the left-right, are solutions to coordination games.
Okay. And you also briefly mentioned asymmetric dilemmas.
Yeah, just quickly, that's simply when the TRPS payoffs aren't the same for both players. Maybe the stakes are higher for one prisoner than the other, which would obviously affect their calculations.
Got it. So we've covered a massive amount of the basic dilemma, iteration, Axelrod, real-world stuff, other games. Before we sort of wrap things up, Is there anything else maybe more advanced or counterintuitive that's worth knowing about?
Well, one really fascinating area, though it gets quite mathematical, is the discovery of zero determinant strategies, or ZD strategies.
Zero determinant. Sounds complex.
It is a bit, but the basic idea is pretty wild. These are strategies for the iterated prisoner's dilemma, specifically in versions where there's some randomness involved. And what these ZD strategies allow a player to do is essentially unilaterally set a fixed mathematical relationship between their own long-term score and their opponent's long-term score.
Unilaterally. Like, I can decide how our scores relate, regardless of what you do.
Within certain bounds, yes, in a statistical sense over the long run. It's quite remarkable, and guess what? Our old friend, tit for tat. It turns out to be a specific kind of ZD strategy, one that enforces fairness, basically ensuring that, on average, both players get the same score in the long run.
Wow. Okay, so tit for tat has this hidden mathematical property.
Yeah.
Are there other kinds of ZD strategies?
Yes. Researchers found there are also extortionary ZD strategies.
Extortionary.
Yeah. These strategies allow one player, say player A, to basically guarantee that any increase in player B's score also results in an even larger increase in player A's score. It's like player A says, you can do better, but only if I do even better than you. They can essentially try to extort a larger share of the possible payoffs.
That sounds incredibly powerful, like you could dominate the game.
It seems like it. It almost turns the game into something like an ultimatum game, where one player dictates the terms. However, further research showed that while these extortionary strategies can work against simpler opponents, they're generally not evolutionarily stable. Meaning, in a large population with diverse strategies, they tend to get outcompeted eventually. They might provoke too much retaliation or just not thrive in the long run. But perhaps even more surprising
Go on.
is the existence of generous ZB strategies.
Generous. How can a strategy be generous in the prisoner's dilemma?
These strategies are also stable and robust, like tit for tat, but they have a built-in tendency to sometimes cooperate, even when, according to strict tit for tat logic, they should defect, like after the opponent defected. They offer a bit more forgiveness than tit for tat.
And this helps them.
Yes, simulations suggest these generous strategies can actually lead to higher overall levels of cooperation and better scores for both players in the long run, especially in noisy environments where mistakes happen. They are good for the individual using them and good for the group.
That's really mind-bending. So being slightly more forgiving than strict reciprocity can actually be a winning strategy.
It seems so under certain conditions. It just shows how much depth there is to this seemingly simple game. Even after decades of study, we're still finding these incredible nuances.
Absolutely. So, okay, let's try and pull this all together. We've gone deep into the prisoner's dilemma. What's the big picture, the main thing to take away?
I think the absolute core idea is this fundamental tension it reveals. The clash between what's rational for an individual acting purely in their own short-term self-interest and what's best for the group, or even for the individual themselves, in the longer run.
Right. The dominant strategy leads to a suboptimal outcome.
Exactly. And understanding that structure, TRPS, helps us recognize this dynamic playing out all over the place. In economics, politics, psychology, biology, our everyday interactions, it's a really fundamental model of strategic choice when cooperation is beneficial but risky.
So as we finish up this deep dive, what's a final thought you'd like to leave our listeners mulling over?
I'd encourage everyone to just start noticing potential prisoners' dilemmas in their own lives or in the news. Think about a situation you've been in recently or something you read about. Was there a conflict between individual gain and collective good? Can you identify the cooperate and defect options? What were the payoffs, the T, R, P, and S, even if just implicitly? What would genuine cooperation have looked like in that situation? And crucially, what made it difficult? Was it lack of trust, poor communication, uncertainty about the future, short-term pressure?
Yeah.
Just applying that lens, asking those questions, I think it can give you a really valuable new perspective on why people behave the way they do, and maybe even on how to foster cooperation when it really matters.
That's a brilliant challenge, not just understanding the theory, but actively looking for it in the world around us. It really does feel like understanding these principles can give us a sharper way to analyze complex situations. Thanks so much for taking us through all of this today.
It was my pleasure. It's an endlessly fascinating topic, and hopefully this gives people some useful tools for thinking about cooperation and conflict. There's always more to explore in game theory.
Absolutely. And that wraps up this deep dive. You can find more discussions like this wherever you usually listen. Thanks for tuning in.